My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 59 years old, a widow, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon. I've worked as an office manager at a law firm for almost 20 years. I raised two children, my daughter Emily, who just turned 32, and my son Luke, who is 29, and I spent most of my adult life making sure they never struggled the way I once did. Last Tuesday, I received an email that changed everything. It was from Emily. There was no subject line, just her name sitting in my inbox. I smiled before opening it, thinking it might be a quick update or a sweet note before her big day. We had talked about her wedding plans a few weeks earlier. I had already given $30,000 to help her book the venue, hire a photographer, and reserve the florist she'd loved since college. But the moment I opened the email, my smile disappeared.
Mom.
That's how it began. Not Dear Mom, just Mom, like a label. Emily explained that she, along with her fiancé Andrew and his family, had finalized the guest list for the ceremony in Napa Valley. After a lot of thought, they decided it would be best for me to watch the wedding through a live stream instead of attending in person. She added that Andrew's mother was very particular about the guest count and wanted to keep everything intimate. At the end, she included a line that felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. If you want to be part of it, you can watch through the Google Meet link we've created. It should feel just like being there. LOL. I stared at the screen for a long time. My coffee went cold. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. Something inside me quietly shifted, like the ground had cracked open while I was still standing on it. I replied with only 4 words. Sure. Enjoy your big day. No emotion, no argument, just a quiet retreat. And deep down, I knew those 4 words would echo louder than any scream. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want tears. I wanted clarity. I wanted the silence to say what I couldn't. I closed my laptop, finished my now cold coffee, and got ready for work like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. That was the day I stopped pretending my sacrifices meant anything to my daughter. That was the day everything started to change. The drive to the office that morning was silent. Oregon's early spring air still carried a chill, but I hardly noticed. My thoughts kept circling the same question. How did we end up here? I've spent 18 years working at Caldwell Walker Law. It isn't glamorous, but it's steady. And steady was what I needed after my husband died suddenly, when the kids were still teenagers. I remember standing in front of our old washing machine, bills spread across the counter, trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and Emily's upcoming college deposit. Back then, I never hesitated. I gave up weekends, took extra shifts, canceled vacations, and missed birthdays. I kept telling myself there would be time for me later. There never was. Every dollar I saved went to Emily and Luke. When Emily changed majors twice and needed extra credits, I paid. When she moved across the country for a short-lived job in New York, I covered her deposit and her plane ticket. When she cried through her second breakup at 27, I flew out, held her hand, and made her tea in a kitchen that didn't feel like home. When Luke wanted to buy a house with his fiancée, I co-signed the mortgage and wrote the first $10,000 check without hesitation. I never kept track. That's what mothers do, right? But that email made me feel like a transaction, like I had been useful, and now I wasn't. Like I had an expiration date, and it had passed. Back at the office, my boss Robert stopped by my desk. He's one of those rare men who remembers birthdays and how you take your coffee. He noticed right away that something wasn't right. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, setting a latte from the cafe downstairs on my desk. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say, my daughter just uninvited me from her wedding, but instead I smiled and said I hadn't slept well. He didn't press. That small kindness, the coffee, the quiet understanding, nearly broke me. After all the noise in my head that morning, it reminded me that I still existed, that I still mattered, even if only in a quiet way. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. Emily again. Her name lit up my screen like a spotlight I didn't want. Voicemails. Texts. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. This isn't funny. I didn't listen to any of them. Not yet. I sat there sipping my latte and thought maybe it was time to stop being the one who always answered. Maybe it was time to stop playing a role in someone else's story when they wouldn't even let you step on the stage. That afternoon, I made a decision that would shift the ground beneath all of us. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. After work, I didn't drive straight home. I went to First Federal Bank a few blocks from the office. Carlos, the branch manager, had helped me with everything from college funds to adjusting my retirement contributions. He always greeted me by name. "Mrs. Collins," he said with a smile, standing to shake my hand. "What can I do for you today?" I sat across from him and set my purse on the floor. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "I need to cancel a wire transfer," I said. He blinked. "The one to the Napa venue?" "Yes, that one." Carlos hesitated. "There may be a cancellation fee depending on timing, but may I ask why?" "The circumstances have changed," I said, offering nothing more. He checked his screen. "You're in luck. It hasn't processed yet. Just in time." He paused, then looked up at me. "Are you sure, Mrs. Collins? $50,000 is a significant amount." I nodded. "I'm sure." $50,000. That was what I planned to send next, on top of the $30,000 already gone. $80,000 for a wedding I wasn't welcome to attend. I signed the forms and left the bank without looking back. By the time I got home, there were 9 missed calls from Emily and 2 from Luke. One voicemail simply said, "Mom, please don't do this." I turned off my phone. In the kitchen, I reached for the bottle of red wine I'd been saving for Thanksgiving. I never opened it then. Emily was supposed to visit but canceled at the last minute. "Work," she said. I poured a glass, stepped onto the porch, and sat in the fading light. Birds chirped. A neighbor's dog barked. Everything felt still. Then the memories came in waves. All the birthdays I planned alone. The holiday dinners where I pretended I wasn't waiting for a call that never came. The quiet sacrifices no one noticed. The shoes I didn't buy. The car I drove for 14 years. The vacations I kept postponing. I thought about Andrew's mother, a woman who barely knew Emily, yet whose opinion carried more weight than mine. A woman whose idea of family meant excluding the person who carried Emily through every hard season of her life. I thought about the way Emily ended her email with LOL, as if watching her own daughter get married through a screen was somehow a joke. And finally, I thought about myself. Not as a mother, not as a widow, but as a woman. What did I want? Peace. Dignity. A life that didn't revolve around being useful to people who only showed up when they needed something. That night, around 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. It was Luke, still in his work clothes, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked uneasy, holding his phone like a shield. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I could speak. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" "Emily's freaking out." I closed the door calmly. "Hello to you too." He sighed and began pacing. "She says you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult." I laughed softly. Difficult? For not attending a wedding I was uninvited from. He shifted, uncomfortable. "Andrew's parents are paying for most of it, Mom. You know how traditional they are." I raised an eyebrow. Traditional? I already paid $30,000. I was about to give $50,000 more. That's not tradition. That's being used. He froze. "Wait, you were sending another 50? "I was," I said, sipping my wine. "But not anymore." Luke's face went pale. "Mom, they're counting on that. The venue, the food. Not my problem anymore," I said evenly. His voice rose. "Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter." "And I'm her mother," I replied quietly. "A mother who is told to stay home and watch from a screen." He ran his hands through his hair, clearly agitated. "You always make everything about yourself." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me finally gave way. "Get out of my house." "What?" "You heard me, Luke. Get out." "Mom." "No," I said, firm but calm. "I've given everything I had, and I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love." Luke stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked out. The door clicked shut softly, but it sounded louder than any slam. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart racing, and realized something startling. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to 43 missed calls and a stream of frantic messages from Emily. They started with passive-aggressive guilt. "Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is childish." Then the tone shifted. "The venue just called. The payment didn't go through. We're going to lose everything if we don't pay by tomorrow. Andrew's parents are furious. They said this proves they were right about you." At 3:24 a.m., she sent, "I don't understand why you're doing this to me." I smiled into my coffee. Of course, she didn't understand. Emily had grown up with my sacrifices woven so tightly into her life that she never stopped to ask where the comfort came from, the security, the stability. She assumed it would always be there, that I would always be there. But not this time. Later that morning, while reviewing contracts at my desk, an email landed in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding." Period. I opened it without expectation. "Mom," she wrote, "I know you're upset about the live stream situation, but this is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit, and if we don't pay the remaining balance by the end of the day Paris time, the caterer walks. Andrew's parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first." There it was. They were willing to talk about letting me attend now that the money was gone. Not an apology. Not reflection. A negotiation. As if my presence at my own daughter's wedding could be bought and sold. I didn't respond. I closed the email and returned to my work. Around noon, Robert stopped by my desk. "Lunch?" he asked. "That new Italian place just opened." I almost declined, as I usually did, but something in me had shifted. Maybe it was the clarity of the past 24 hours. Maybe I just needed to sit somewhere that didn't ask anything from me. I nodded. I'd like that. Over pasta, he talked about his grandkids and how exhausting and beautiful it was to chase after them. His eyes were warm, real. Then he paused and said gently, "Forgive me, Margaret, but you seem lighter today." I surprised myself by telling him everything. Emily, the email, the wedding, the money, what I did. When I finished, he didn't judge or try to fix it. He just said, "Sometimes the hardest part of love is setting boundaries, especially with the people we've given the most to." He reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. "I think you did the right thing." For the first time in a long while, I believed it too. When I returned to my desk, there were more calls and more texts, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For once, my silence said enough. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the sky was already darkening. The porch light flicked on automatically. Everything looked calm, almost peaceful. But someone was sitting on my front steps. As I got closer, I recognized her. Sophia. She stood quickly, brushing invisible lint from her coat. Sophia had been Emily's best friend since 5th grade. She spent countless weekends in our house baking cookies, watching movies, laughing in sleeping bags until dawn. I hadn't seen her in years. "Mrs. Collins," she said softly, "I'm sorry to show up like this." "It's all right," I replied, unlocking the door. "Would you like some tea?" She followed me into the kitchen, her eyes tracing the walls as if they still held old echoes. I filled the kettle and waited. "Emily sent you?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "She's a mess. They lost the venue. The florist backed out. Andrew's parents are threatening to cancel everything." I said nothing, setting 2 mugs on the counter. "She's panicking," Sophia continued. "She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it." "Is that why you're here?" I asked. "To fix it?" She shook her head. "No. I'm here to ask, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind?" I paused. Was there? Would an apology really change how it felt to be excluded? To be treated like a bank account? To be told you're only welcome when your money is? I looked at Sophia, still young, still hopeful. "No," I said softly. "There isn't." Her shoulders slumped. Not even if she apologizes? I handed her a mug of tea. Words are easy, Sophia, especially when people are desperate. But the people who truly love you don't wait until you cut them off to finally see you. Sophia stared into her tea and nodded slowly. I get it, she said. Even if she doesn't. You don't need to be sorry, I replied. We stood there in silence for a moment, two women from different generations connected by one difficult truth. Sometimes love has limits. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to walk away. Sophia didn't stay long. She didn't argue or plead. She simply thanked me, hugged me gently, and disappeared into the night. And I closed the door, finally, on a version of myself I had long outgrown. The wedding never happened the way they planned. They scrambled to find another venue, but everything was either booked or far too expensive without the money I had once promised. According to Luke, they ended up with a small backyard ceremony weeks later, just a handful of relatives and Andrew's parents. I wasn't invited, and this time I didn't need to be. In the weeks that followed, Emily sent one more email. It was long, emotional, half apology and half justification. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply finished. There's a quiet kind of peace that comes with letting go, not in anger, but in clarity. For the first time in decades, I woke up without wondering who needed something from me, without bracing myself for another guilt trip disguised as love. I made a new rule for myself. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. I go to work. I read novels. I joined a pottery class. I have dinners with friends who see me for who I am, not for what I can give. And I've learned something I wish I had known much sooner. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Period. If this story resonated with you, share it, leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.